This is a politically centered podcast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeremy Silver, and this is a politically centered podcast. February 10th, 2026, and the words Tumbler Ridge are something that most Canadians will never forget in their entire lives. It's the day some say Canada lost their innocence and that we weren't immune to the mass shootings and the horrors that we see on our American brothers and sisters networks on a daily basis. And we sit back and we say that we're immune to some of the things that go on in the US, but I think to a certain extent we have lost that innocence as a country. At least that is how I feel. Everybody has their own personal feelings, but I think we can all agree that what happened on February 10th was an atrocity, and that, as parents, especially if you're a parent, none of us will ever want to be in that position. It's horrible to even think about. It's still very fresh for a lot of people. And our guest coming on today, who is a longtime resident or former resident of Tumbler Ridge, BC, where the mass shooting took place, has got a story to tell. So with that, I'm going to introduce Jeff. How are you, Jeff?
Okay, and you?
I'm doing okay. So I'll let you start, Jeff. How did that day start for you? Walk me through that day.
That day started with me going to work. No different than any other day. Pretty benign, nothing too exciting. And as the day progressed, you're busy and you're not paying attention to a lot of things. And I break my phone out and I see that there's the news is starting to report on something in Tumbler Ridge. So my longtime friend that I've known for more than 30 years, he was best man at my wedding. I best man his wedding. I reached out to him and I wanted to see what was going on down there. So I asked him, I said, what's going on in Tumbler Ridge? I hear there's something crazy going on. And he responded immediately. So, he didn't have a lot of information at that time. The news wasn't necessarily up to speed on what was happening, but they were reporting on it. So we heard there was an active shooter. He made some pretty simple comments, this is crazy and whatever. So when you hear something like an active shooter and you hear something about something in Canada that's happening like this, you expect to hear something like, maybe the RCMP has done some sort of a drug bust, and you have somebody that is maybe getting into a conflict with them. As time progresses, no, we find out that actually it's getting a little more serious. Now he's fearing for, something a little worse. He's hearing murmurs of something that's potentially happening, but he doesn't know. So the school he hears is maybe starting to close and whatever, and he's at work at the time. So as I'm texting with him, he's on his way. He's left work and he's headed there. He's going to go get his kids. So he does. I'm texting with him. He's keeping me updated. I'm worried. I lived there for a while. I know a lot of people there, and it's obviously gone beyond something as simple as some sort of a drug dealer or something like that, right? Your mind goes to these places. So as that's progressing, well, he's gone to pick up the kids. So he tells me, when he's got the kids and the pressure seems like it's relieved, but it really isn't, because one's missing. And he's worried. So he starts telling me about this. At this point, I had to work a little late that day, not too late, but whatever. I'm not in a hurry to get home. I'm doing a couple things. As I'm driving, he's kind of updating me. I get home. I sit down for dinner with my family, and I'm looking for these updates. I'm not looking for, every second, but I am looking for these little things to know that it's okay. Comes a point where, and I'm not throwing shade at him at all with this, but we get to this point where I'm not getting texts back. I'm not getting anything. We're into a point now where I'm kind of being ghosted, but I realize he's probably got a lot going on. So they can't find one. And I think to myself, I'm going to leave this alone. He's going to reach out to me, and it's going to be all right. As the minutes progress, I'm not getting that text. I'm not getting that phone call. I'm not getting anything. And I had a little chat with my wife, and I said, I've known him most of my life. We became best friends at the age of 7. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to phone him. So I do. And he's having a tough time. And I can hear him crying, and he doesn't know what to do and whatever. And I said, can I come over there and try and be of some help? I said it a little differently than that, but I want to come over and help. And he told me, he said, Jeff, I would never tell you no. So I had a conversation with my wife. I have 3 young children. I went and spoke to all 3 of them. I gave them a kiss. I gave them a hug. My oldest has the biggest heart in the whole world, and she asked if she could come with me. And I told her she couldn't. I kind of knew more about this at this point, because now I am following the news, and they are saying more things about the school. I didn't tell her that, though. And so I gave him a kiss. I gave him a hug. I gave my wife, and I gave her a hug and a kiss. And I hopped in my pickup, and I headed that way. I knew of a back route that would save me a bunch of time. But with that, you lose cell service. It saves about 50 minutes. And so I told him, I said, I'm going to be out of service. He knows the route too. So I said, I'm going to be out of service. And when I get into town, I'm going to phone you. He agreed. Also very worried at the time. We still don't know a lot about what's going on, but we do know that we do know we have one unaccounted for. And so anyways, I phoned work. I talked to him. I said, this is what's going on. I broke down a little time, and he offered to drive me. I thought at the time, no, I'm tougher than this. I can do this. I appreciate it. I should have taken him up on that offer. I drove faster than probably any man should, but I got there safely. And as soon as I got into service, I phoned my friend, and when he answered, he was, fuck, man, I've known him a long time. He couldn't keep it together. They had just found out the news on what had happened. And he said, brother, I need you to give me a couple of minutes. You pull into his place in town. He's one of the first houses. And so anyways, I pulled into his driveway. And a few minutes go by. I don't know what to do. I called my wife, called my sister. I'm beside myself. I don't know how to handle this. And he texts me right away, and he says he's got to go in and he's got to explain what just happened to their family. Their family to me, but that's not my blood. That's their blood. So he said, no, I want you to come up to the house. So I did, and I got there literal minutes after that explanation had to happen. I didn't know where my emotions were. I didn't know if I was sad, mad. I didn't have a clue. But to walk into that house and have to understand that I still get to kiss my kids every night and others don't is it's a hard pill to swallow. It's a truly hard pill to swallow. I spent a number of days with them once family started to get there, because they're, families are spread out. So once everybody actually started to get there, and I knew that they had a good support system, people that were going to be there for them no matter what. I had another conversation with him, and I said it's time for me to leave. It's time for me to go be with my family. And I did. We talked that morning. We went over there. We had breakfast. Made sure everybody's okay. I hugged everybody, and off I went. And at that point, they had their family there. We've been in contact most days since then. Even simple little text messages like, "Hey, just checking in. I don't need a lot from you. Just checking in." And I do that. And I feel guilt knowing a few things, like I still have my family. But I guess one of the last things I'll say about this or whatever currently is I can't imagine. I can't imagine what those feelings would be if you were one of the affected families.
Jeff, how well did you know the kids? All of his kids?
Well, his kids are nephews to mine. I didn't know all of them as well as others, but I know them well. I know them well.
I understood when you were telling the story, you left out a lot of, I guess, feelings that you were feeling at the time. I know that's really hard, but what was the primary feeling at the time as you went through those different stages?
Feelings would have been that this can't be happening. It would have been that there's no way that it's that person. There's no way. Like you would assume in a scenario like that, and I think all three of you would probably feel the same way. It's they're hiding. They're there, but we just can't find them. It would be like they're in a closet. They're somewhere. You'll find them. You'll find them. But then deep down inside yourself, as you're watching the timeline and the hours go by, it starts to set in and it starts to get heavy. And you really hope and you cling to the fact that that's just not the case. But at some point it does start to settle with you that maybe it is. And your heart and your gut is being pulled out of you.
Just to let our audience know, we are intentionally being vague in order to honor the family's privacy. We don't want anybody to know which of the children or family we're talking about. It was the family's wishes, and I completely agree that right now it's still very fresh, and they need time to grieve. And one thing that impressed me about you, Jeff, when I spoke to you a couple of days ago when we were talking about doing this interview, is you acknowledged that the entire country was grieving and that you were grieving. Nobody was grieving more than the family who lost their child, but that everybody was in a state of grief, and you understood everybody else's reaction, all over the country, and that people had to grieve in their own way, especially the parents. And that speaks to your level of emotional intelligence, and that you're a very compassionate person. That you, in being so close to the situation, can take a step back and acknowledge why everybody else is acting like they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's fair. I think that's
Jeff,
I appreciate you saying that.
How old was the child?
12. To speak a little more on that, maybe one of the reasons that it hit me so hard or whatever, not only knowing them, and I think there's a few fathers out here that would understand this as well, is when you have kids, and I don't know why this bothered me as much, but it did. When you have kids of that age or close to that age, it hits hard. It hits really hard, you know?
I can't speak for everybody's reaction, but I know as a father that I had said to you a couple of days ago, my kids were at their mom's the week this happened, and I wanted to hug my daughter, who's the same age as some of those children that were killed, and I wanted to smell her, and that's what I wanted more than anything. And it sounds so absurd saying that, and it was so close to home for many of us. It's a feeling you can't explain.
I also did the same thing. So
thank you, Jeff. I can't imagine how hard that was for you. I do have two other guests to bring on, and I'm going to introduce them now, and we're going to have a discussion and try and see if we can find, well, I don't think we're going to find a solution on this podcast today, but maybe at least we can talk about it and find some common ground and start the conversation, because it needs to happen at some point. So our first guest that I'm going to introduce, and I'm going to be reading from a script for this part, because Rocky Rutledge, also known as Rocky, he is from Medicine Hat, Alberta, where this podcast is airing from. And he's a firearms advocate and former owner of an indoor gun range and firearms retail store located in southeastern Alberta. In 2021, he also ran for local municipal government in the city of Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada, the same election that I ran in as a municipal candidate. That's how Rocky and I initially really got to know each other, and I've known you for approximately 4 years now. It's always been a privilege. Thanks for coming on, Rocky.
Thanks for having me here today, Jeremy.
Matt is our third guest. Matt is coming to us from the United States. Matt, you're going to have to let me know what state you are coming in from, because I don't think I got that info from you.
Certainly, Arkansas.
State of Arkansas?
Yes.
And Matt, you are the co-host of the WHI podcast in the United States, which I had to Google and look up. And you are a very centrist podcast, which I really liked. You did not pick sides, and so I think your podcast and mine had a lot of commonalities, which is why I reached out to you for commentary, because I think idealistically we probably share a lot of common ideals. And the WHI stands for what?
We have issues.
And I had a laugh and a nod of acknowledgement how appropriate that was when I figured out what WHI stood for. You're also a member of the American Solidarity Party National Committee. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, can you give me just a very brief explanation of what the American Solidarity Party is for our viewers?
Yeah, sure. So it is considered a democratic party, and it is rooted in Christian ethics. Very Catholic, social teaching heavy party. Of course, you don't have to be Christian to be part of it. We do have atheists. Myself, I'm a Protestant. So, all walks of life are, of course, welcome. Really, what the American Solidarity Party is concerned with is pro-life for the whole life. I mean, from womb to tomb, we want people taken care of. We want to be good stewards of our environment. We want to take care of our resources. We are not opposed to any kind of military intervention, but we want that to be an absolute last resort. And I think the American Solidarity Party is a very good party for the politically homeless in America to find a home in right now. There's a lot of people, the majority of our voters right now are starting to turn independent. People are starting to be fed up with the two-party system. So I think this would be a very good place for people to find that home. And as you said, it is very centered. We do have certain members that lean to the left. We have certain members that lean to the right. I myself came over from the Greens. We have ex-Republicans, ex-Democrats, ex-Democratic Socialists. So yeah, just a good old party. Everybody out to come in and check it out.
Rocky, so I had said in my intro, I want to begin with you, that, I felt to a certain extent that a lot of the grieving process, putting aside the fact that it was so close to home in Western Canada, and anybody with a child can just close their eyes and imagine the pain, although I don't know if we could ever feel it like the parents could. No parent should ever have to bury a child. I think we can all agree on that, especially like this. What do you think of my comments about, that Canada has lost that innocence the way I always thought we have? Because I remember growing up and hearing that Canadian were peacekeepers and were fun-loving, Tim Hortons coffee drinkers, and Matt is nodding, and he probably heard some of the same things. And that is the stigma that I grew up with, that that a Canadian encompassed, that we were friendly, we were loving, and that we had lots of open spaces. Our streets were clean, and we hated violence, and we were peacekeepers. But I would argue that even though we think we're still so much different than our American counterpart, and we are in some ways, that we have a lot of commonalities that we don't like to admit. And this was one of them, smashing us in the face. What do you think, Rocky?
I think you're absolutely correct. We haven't always been immune from it. There was the shooting of Polytechnic. There's also Tabor a number of years ago as well, which was very close to Medicine Hat. And then this one, it's the media and everybody kind of focuses on the U.S. when these events happen, but we do have it here. One thing we've definitely been experiencing that's been driving things, a lot of mental health is a big issue that's growing to be worse and worse in that we notice lately.
Jeff, what are your thoughts?
I'd agree with Rocky on that one. That was something that you and I talked about the other day on the phone. The mental health aspect of it is something that I do not believe we take seriously enough. It's something that I believe we don't offer enough. Northern communities really struggle with that. And when you do get to find good help when it comes to that, it comes at a cost, and it's not always cheap. So it's something that doesn't always work for all families and all different levels of society.
So, Matt, going to south of the border, I'm curious, when did you hear about the Tumbler Ridge shooting?
Well, I mean, just the nature of things, I try to stay in tune with news pretty frequently. When I'm on job sites, I'm listening to podcasts and things like that. So I pretty much get things instantaneously as they happen. So I heard about it right when it happened. But the information, and this is something Jeff mentioned earlier, the information was very sparse. There was not a lot being said about it. So it was actually one of those things that I kind of tuned out and came back to, the next day. And finally, the details kind of started trickling out.
What was the general reaction of some of your fellow Americans when you were discussing this?
I would say surprise, because like you said, it's just not something you really think of in Canada. And I'm not well versed in, your gun restrictions, your gun laws and policies, but I know they're stricter than ours. So this isn't something that you would think of happening in Canada. But at the same time, just with the state of the world right now, it's not surprising. So and in America, we've almost become numb to this happening. If you go to any mass incident, you look up the videos of it, and you look through the comment section, it's people saying they've become numb to this and accepted this kind of as a part of way of life.
Yeah, that's the impression that I get from watching US media as well. And we are somewhat numb to, because we get all of your media here too. You tend to dominate Canadian media, the US networks a lot. And it's incredible that when we post about your mass shootings here, the most common comment underneath is, what else is new? Again, just another one. There's been so many. We lost track. So we have the same reaction. That's interesting that you're having the same reaction in the United States. But yeah, in Canada, it is an extremely rare occurrence, and I agree. We were all in a little bit of shock. Rocky, you are a gun rights activist from southeastern Alberta, and you owned a shooting range here in southeastern Alberta. What is your opinion on the current gun rights in Canada? I'll let you take it from here. You know far more about it than I do.
I think they're actually quite fair here in Canada for a lot of gun rights. There's things that have been taken to an extreme with the recent gun bans. The government's really taken a position of banning things. We'll think that'll stop what's been happening here with shootings, but that's obviously not been a very successful solution. And millions of dollars are getting spent purchasing firearms from people who don't have the mental health issues that are causing these issues. Our current gun laws are in place to protect people from other people who do things like this. So the person that did the shooting was really in no state at all to even own a firearm. We don't know where that person got a firearm from. With Canadian gun laws, that firearm should have been locked up and unloaded and out of reach of anybody who's not licensed and authorized to use that, but somehow that person got it. So the laws aren't necessarily working, and we failed in that respect.
To be clear, to add context to that, I was looking that up, that the shooter had taken a hunting rifle and modified it to fire like an automatic, and had also got their hands on a high-end magazine clip. By Canadian law, it couldn't hold more than 5 rounds at one time. Am I correct?
That totally depends on the magazine. Pistol calibers can hold up to 10. Rifles can hold up to 5. Semi-autos typically hold 5 rifles.
Right, and the gun was apparently a semi-automatic rifle modified to shoot like a machine gun. And that person had acquired a high-capacity magazine. That was recent information the RCMP released. How hard or easy is it to find instructions on how to modify a rifle to fire like a machine gun? Because that is beyond my comprehension.
It's really not that hard. It's you can find the instructions and stuff online. Or you can file down a sear, and there's different other components that you can do. There's also bump firing. There's stocks that can cause it to happen, and even just a worn-out gun can go into full auto. And so somebody would have had a significant amount of time with that firearm and spent a lot of research making this happen with it. So this person didn't just grab a hunting rifle and find a high-capacity magazine. They had it in their possession for quite a long time and got it done right and tested it to make sure it was right. There's a fine line between going from semi-auto to full automatic to semi-auto to absolutely useless.
According to information, this individual, I'm avoiding the topic of he or she for obvious reasons. I heard that they used a shotgun, sadly, to kill their brother and mother, and then proceeded to take the modified rifle into the school for the shooting that happened in the school. According to RCMP, they say that neither gun were registered, and they have no idea where they came from. That's a little scary. Jeff, what are your feelings on this?
I'm not really sure what to say on that, to be honest with you, Jeremy. So when it comes to doing something like that and having a plan to go to the next course of action, you've already done something that is so evil, and you can do that and go to the next step, which is somewhere that is a school like that. It's beyond comprehension. You're talking an individual that is basically a legal adult and going into a school with kids that are way younger than that individual. I'd have a hard time believing that they bullied that person or whatever you want to believe on that. They were so much younger. I think my feelings on that are more along the lines of you wanted to create the most chaos you possibly could. I don't know why you did it. I don't know why you would want to do it, but I believe it was just along the lines of complete chaos and evil.
Matt, what is your position or your party's position on gun rights in the United States?
Well, I mean, we obviously have to respect the Second Amendment and the culture that America has with guns. I mean, it's kind of crass to put it this way, but America has a bloody history. I mean, we are here because of guns. The American Solidarity Party, we want to keep people safe, but we don't see that happening through bans. And I think this situation kind of is proof of concept on that. Canada's a lot more restrictive than we are, and yet this still happened. And like Rocky said, modifying a rifle, if you're lucky enough to get it right, you can see, the damage you can cause with that. So American Solidarity Party is really focused on, we want to standardize information. So our national background system can catch people before any of these things happen. We don't want anything falling through the cracks, which it sounds like in this case is what happened with Tumbler Ridge. There's a couple other things that we have put forward in our platform. We have a 72-hour handgun ban. Or handgun waiting period, excuse me. I personally don't agree with that. I think you ought to be able to get your handgun as soon as you go in to buy it, provided that you pass all of your checks and, go through that process. But that's our main goal, is we want to increase mental health resources, because that's really where the problem has started. That's the reason this is there's always been mass killings, but this uptick that we've seen recently, it's all due to not having the resources to handle these mental health crises and, the fear of being politically correct. That's kind of, I think, what happened in this case. I understand that this person had been treated for mental health issues, was on the police radar, and they just fell through the cracks. And so that's what we want to do, is we want to fortify the system that we already have in place. I don't think that banning anything is really going to help.
Rocky, what do you think about American gun laws from as a Canadian perspective?
They're on par. Like, we don't have that 72-hour waiting period we have for handguns. We have it's an overnight process to get approval to go pick up your handgun. Same with rifles and shotguns. You can go into the gun store and you walk out with them 10 minutes later after they run your license and verify that it's valid. I agree with the American gun laws, and I agree with a lot of the Canadian gun laws too. Like, before you mentioned, like, neither gun was registered and no idea where they came from. That's typical for non-restricted firearms. They never were registered. They would pass hands between people that either licensed or not. Once you come out of the gun store, there's straw man sales where a licensed individual would sell it to an unlicensed individual, and you'd never track where that gun came from or who sold it to them. So a lot of the new gun laws, where they do track through license verification numbers on who sold who what gun, brings a lot of that to an end. This individual could have bought those firearms from a straw man sale from somebody selling those firearms. So I do like the idea of tracking where guns have gone and came from. If you're not a criminal, who cares if nobody knows where your gun came from? We track our vehicles, we track motorcycles, we track everything that we purchased.
In 2023, I looked up some statistics here, and 13.9 people per 100,000 died by homicide in the United States because of a gun. In Canada, it was 2 to 3 people per 100,000. So, is the American mental health just worse? It's an honest question. What is the difference here, Matt?
Yes, I would say that's part of it, the mental health aspect, of course. And there's just also a difference in culture. We've got these kind of subcultures that have formed, back in, say, around 50s and 60s, Los Angeles, New York, the big cities, anywhere gang activity was taking place. And it's just it comes with the territory. If you're engaged in gang violence, then you're going to have weapons. And there's gun culture in America is kind of strange. If you haven't experienced it, it's hard to explain it. But there's actually been a deterioration in gun culture. There was a time when guns were treated as tools with respect, something that I very much admire about Canada. It sounds like part of your process in owning firearms is you require education. Now in America, just anybody can go and purchase a firearm with no experience or not required to go to a range or anything. There was a time when kids actually shot in school. There was hunter safety in school. Everybody did hunter safety. And if their parents didn't pass that knowledge down to them, I grew up in a Democrat household, but we had loaded firearms laying around everywhere. But I knew from an early age, thanks to, my dad, you don't touch those. And I knew what they were capable of. I knew what they were for. And so that's kind of the shift we've seen in America, is just from a respectful gun culture that understands what they're for, understands the history and the mechanics of it, to a culture that sees this as just a way to gain instant power.
Would you all agree that it's a symptom and not the cause? The people owning guns, that it's of course going to be a factor on some level, but it's not the over-encompassing problem. And by the way, you two can feel free to engage each other in conversation as well, and cut me right out of it if you have something you want to say to each other. But Matt, you brought up mental health, and there's a lot of differences between the United States and Canada. Full disclosure here, I have more American family than Canadian, dotted all the way from California to Florida and everywhere in between. Most of my family was born American, at least this generation, the generation that I am part of. So I have a lot of American family. I'm very integrated and into a lot of the American culture through that family. And I think the one thing we do share as the two countries is, can anybody deny we're in a mental health crisis? A mental health crisis, full stop. You take out the gun debate, you take out the trans debate, and we are in a severe mental health crisis. And it seems like everybody picks the topics they want and debates the topics. Matt?
Yeah, mental health is a complex thing. Of course, I have never been to Canada, don't have a Canadian experience whatsoever to speak on. But I think it was Jeff had mentioned earlier, in northern Canada, which I would suspect is very much isolated. There's a mental health epidemic, and that I would think that's probably due to isolation mainly. Here it's just such a hodgepodge, and we're 50 states, and each state is very very unique in its own right. And part of it is drug induced, just from drug abuse. You have mental health issues, a lack of opportunities. These inner cities that once were thriving and once were hubs of manufacturing, now all the jobs are gone, and people have selling drugs and gang activity is how that they survive. And you want to take the trans debate out of it, but that is an aspect of mental health and how that's being treated. Americans are definitely over-medicated. And I say this as somebody who was treated for depression and anxiety. I've taken some of these drugs that they've put people on, and I couldn't take them for more than a few weeks just because of how sick they made me, and I was worse off with them. And that just seems to be the easy way out, is just to over-medicate everybody to, tamp those symptoms down. So it's such a complex issue. You have to look at it by region, by people, by racial group, by religion. It's very difficult to pinpoint how to best address it.
In 2022, I looked up the numbers again. In Canada, there was 110 doses of psychotropic meds that encompasses antipsychotics, antidepressants per 100,000 people. In the United States, it was 138. Mm-hmm. After you balance out the two numbers, it's the same. So we do share that commonality in the United States and Canada. do you feel from the U.S. side that the trans population gets singled out? Because that was my impression, and I want to bring this in because it's important. Because from my Canadian perspective, you've got an extremist demographic of that population that has hijacked the entire woke movement, whatever that means anymore. I don't even know, because it's become so convoluted.
Right.
And just like everything, you have an extremist faction that hijacks a movement and brings only the worst of it to the surface. What is everybody's thoughts on my opinion in the Canadian system is that the trans population has always existed, and what we have done in order to, like you put it, to pander to everybody. I'm not sure if that's the word you used, Matt, but I think that's what you were getting to. And Canadians are much further ahead than Americans in that department, in my opinion. Though we have filtered an entire demographic of mentally ill people through the trans system. And I don't have a problem with trans people. I have many friends who call themselves trans, who I respect. I will always use their pronouns, but I do have an objection to people screaming I'm trans and getting free healthcare, or getting filtered through the trans healthcare system that is set up for them, when they belong potentially in an institution and off the street. And I'm not a doctor, but you take somebody who's completely mentally ill, who's got psychotic tendencies, and who is exhibiting dangerous behaviors, taking pictures with guns on social media. Just because they put on a dress doesn't mean we shouldn't say this person probably should be in a mental institution, and we shouldn't protect them with trans rights. And I know that's a lot to process all at once. So, Rocky, how about you start on that? What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right with that. It's hiding behind something to just push your own agenda and say, I'm special, I can do what I want because you identify as trans. Or we have to stop dancing around the politically correct way of doing it and recognize we don't care what you identify as. You're clearly an issue to our society. I believe we're looking at that in Medicine Hat right now, actually, with a local bakery owner talking about a hypothetical scenario of a shooting around a school. We should look past the fact that he's a bakery owner, or maybe we should say, hey, there's something wrong with this guy.
Yeah, that's something, Matt and Jeff, I don't know if you heard, for context, that was something that happened today. It's still very fresh. Oh, wow. A local business owner had typed up a hypothetical school shooting scenario and posted it on social media. And not everybody knew it was hypothetical. If you look at it and you read it over multiple times, it does come across as kind of a movie script. In my opinion, extraordinarily in bad timing and bad taste. Still, Tumbler Ridge is very fresh. I don't understand what was going through his head. It was horrible.
That needs to be looked into. I mean, just honestly, it needs to be investigated.
Another thing on that, Jeremy, that I'd like to add. I know you went off on some statistics there. I don't think that the Americans have it that much worse on the mental health side of things. I think we're in the same boat they are. I know people. I have tons of other stories of anecdotal evidence of it, but I think we're in the same boat. I think we're too closely tied. Well, we're not too closely tied, but I mean, we're sister nations, is what I'm trying to say. So I think in a lot of ways we don't address it like they don't address it. Statistics can be skewed, but I think we're all there, and I think we're all in it together, to be quite honest.
For sure.
Matt, how is the trans population in the United States? Did you feel that, what I said from a Canadian perspective of the extremist mentally ill population using the trans community as a shield to not get discriminated against, so we can't do anything about it? I mean, what is your perspective?
Oh, I think there's a lot of people who are legitimately in the movement. I don't think that they're singled out so much. I think it's just something that we actually do have to address. I've watched how this has progressed over the years because in high school we had a trans student. This is back in 2004, 2005. And, bear in mind, at the time I was going to school in Louisiana, so deep South. You would think that'd be ground zero for abuse of a trans individual. Nobody cared. No, I didn't even know that they were trans. I had to be told. I had no clue, and life went on. But it's not really the fault of the trans community because there's been a certain political leaning, a certain political party that's kind of tried to hijack that, and they've whipped up this fear campaign within the trans community to make them think, that they're being abused, that they're being attacked. And when you set that narrative, this group is going to be on edge. This group, and let's just face it, I mean, they're already mentally unstable. They're mentally unwell, most of them. And so when you tell this group you're being persecuted to the point of death, what would you expect to happen? They're going to fight back, and it's a compounding issue. You have them on hormones, which messes with the mind, messes with anger control, outbursts like that. You have their mental health drugs mixed in with that into this cocktail that's extremely dangerous. They do
Hopefully we can all agree that if you take a mentally unwell, psychotic individual and pump them full of hormones, it's probably not going to be a good outcome.
Well, certainly. I mean, back when I was a gym rat, we used to take pro hormones, which was like you could get at GNC off of the shelf. This was like the over-the-counter version of some of these hormones these people are taking. And so I remember the effects that we saw. Pro hormones were banned in America for a little bit because of the effects. So I can only imagine what the pharmaceutical grade does. And then you tack on, ostracizing these people, making them feel shunned by society. Maybe they themselves have made themselves feel shunned by society. You throw in this new variable with them getting on, AI programs and talking to these chatbots who are putting ideas into their head, affirming a lot of their ideas. It's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I think the trans community gets branded a lot by the extremist faction of it. And if you look at world statistics, 3% of any demographic, regardless of what demographic that is going to be extremist. And they are the worst of the worst. And is it normal do you think it's normal human reaction to look at that 3% and brand it brand it to an entire demographic? Well,
so something that is different in this case is we actually do have trans individuals that come out. They're not in favor of surgeries on minors. They openly admit that this is kind of either a fetish or an interest of theirs. They understand they will never be a biological woman, biological man. I'm trying to think of some of the names, TikTok influencers. But what I see is these individuals kind of step out of line to post these videos that is like, my trans identity is my personal thing. I'm not letting that interfere with everybody else's lives. And they are just crucified by the trans community at large. And so I'm seeing that these extremists are even shouting down the voices of reason within this group. So that's what's concerning to me is you can't, the representatives of the more mentally stable can't even get their message out and truly offer help to this community.
Rocky, what do you think north of the border perspective?
I think it's much the same. It's exactly true, especially again in smaller communities, whether it's northern or southern parts of Canada. There's a very small amount of trans where they won't come out. And they face a lot more challenges among their peers and the medications and what they face in every day and the amount of sheer stress of doing that. But I believe there's also the ones that do it just for attention seeking. You see kids in grade 1 that decide that now they're trans because they've heard about something on TV. And then by grade 2, they forgot all about that idea. But it's really hard to filter out good and bad. and I'm definitely not a mental health expert, so I really shouldn't judge or comment too much on that topic.
I think, you know, like everything, it's convoluted. There's a little bit of everything mixed in there, right? And I'm not sure. I think we have approached it sort of like a blanket situation. Don't upset Matt. You know, echoes of what Matt said. Don't upset anybody. Don't label anybody. Don't separate them. But you know, I think I'm even seeing a huge shift in the trans community where a lot of the trans community is saying, you know, these people are insane. Keep them away from us. And even the trans and LGBTQ plus community has been pushing back against what they see as an extremist faction of the community. Jeff, you're nodding. What do you think?
I was nodding because I have a friend. I won't name him, but he's part of not the trans community, but the other part of it there, and he's voiced his concern to me about that, where some of it's been taken a little too far. And he's explained, you know, at depth to me how their community doesn't appreciate it.
So, you know, Matt, just for some context, I'm sure Jeff and Rocky do know about this, but Premier Danielle Smith, who I think most Americans probably that name rings somewhat of a bell. She is Alberta is famously about as close as you get to being American and still being Canadian by most examples. We are known famously as the Canadian Texas. And we're very conservative here compared to the rest of Canada. And Premier Danielle Smith, which is our version of your what is the word I'm looking for? Leader of the state. The name eludes me at the moment. Governor. Thank you. Yes, Premier Danielle Smith is the American equivalent of an American governor or of a Canadian governor. I don't know what I'm trying to say. You understand. Anyway, that didn't come out right.
Head of a territory. I got you.
Yeah. But she is moving towards a mandatory recovery. I can't remember the term she's using, but they're using terminology to make it sound like beautiful and that it's empathetic, and maybe that's what it'll turn into. I don't know. But at the moment, there are multi-million-dollar institutions being built in Calgary and Edmonton, the two largest cities in Alberta. Well, as far as I know, we are the only place in Canada that is doing that. I don't know if there are any similar ones being built in the United States, but from what I'm seeing is kind of like the political and the general public saying we can't do this anymore. That, you know, we have a segment of the mentally ill population. They're on the street. They're overdosing in people's basements on fentanyl. And yes, I include this individual who was the shooter in that category. And regardless of how their mental health presents, there is a demographic that I don't think should be on the street. And, you know, 50 years ago, we decided mental institutions were cruel. And then we slowly, bit by bit, we have been closing them all over the last 50 years. And then 20 years ago, we went to a community health structure in both countries and said, let's let them out of the institutions. We'll support them on the street. We'll give them all the resources, and because mental institutions were cruel. And then we gave them Facebook. That was great decision. So, you know, I what I'm seeing in multiple places around the United States and Canada is that shift to some people don't belong on the street. There is a small demographic of the mentally ill population that is simply never going to be helped. And it's costing us our children in many cases. So what are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. And that's something that President Trump has been criticized, you know, just a lot over, because he promised to bring back mental institutions. Now, whether or not that happens, we'll see what he, you know, how he moves forward with that. But 100%. And they were cruel, and there was horrible things happening, and experimentations and just abuse was just rampant throughout these institutions. So I get that, but you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, and just completely abolish the system. You could clean the system up. And to your point, is it any better for these people to freeze to death, starve to death, overdose on the streets? It's not. And being a Christian, I believe that the church is supposed to step up in this regard. But even the church has only so many resources that can go into this. And we have wasted billions upon billions of dollars on this for programs that do not work. One recently I saw was on Facebook. It was a story about a tiny house community they had built for these, to get homeless people off the street. And I knew this development because I'd followed this story. And I said, that picture is not that development. And so I started to do some digging, and I found the picture of the actual development, not the photoshopped, photo. I was going to say photo bucket, but I guess photo bucket's not still a thing. Not the stock photo that they had posted in the news story. I found the actual tiny house community, and it was trashed. It was wrecked, and it's in the middle of a neighborhood. And like you were saying, these people, they can't do for themselves, and we have to have some kind of other structure in place to help them. We have to have actual mental health remedies for this. We can't just pull them off the street, stick them in a little place, and say, hey, good luck, hope you work it out. Because if they could work it out, they wouldn't have been on the street to begin with.
Well, it seems like both countries, Rocky, have a similar problem where we took them out of the institutions and we gave them the resources. And then we told an entire demographic of traumatized people who are born with things like FASD, who do not have the ability to navigate the system on their own. We gave them the book and said, here you go. Here's everything you need. Go ahead and read it and help yourself. Yeah. Well, that's really helpful. I mean, from my opinion, that's absurd. And that's what has landed us in this position, is that we have taken an entire demographic of people and given them resources and expect these people to understand how to navigate these resources. And they don't, or they don't want to, which one it is. I don't care. Rocky, what do you think?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And then these people also become dependent on these resources as well. They don't learn to function in different jobs. Like, you used to have simple tasks like gardening or sorting out bottles at the recycling depot. They had jobs, they had tasks, and now it's a whole lot of, we're just going to give you money, we're going to give you medication. And like you said, like, turn them loose. There's no institution, there's no help. There's nothing really there for them. And then, they end up on the street, they end up on drugs. They starve to death, freeze to death, and there's nothing there for them. And then, extreme things can happen, and there should be something done for it. It's another case of stepping around people to not try and offend, saying, hey, you should be locked up in a white coat in a padded room. When really, maybe that should have happened.
Well, I think the only other option is to have a social worker take each individual one of their hands and walk them through the system that is there for them. But that's not realistic money-wise. I mean, is that going to cost us less than the institution? I personally don't think so. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't think it's not necessarily just a money thing, too. Think about the manpower needed to do something like that, to take each individual by the hand. It's not feasible. It's never going to be feasible. You start stacking on other issues when you lax your drug laws and whatever. I mean, personally, you've seen what happened in BC recently, where they went real easy on drugs, and I don't think the outcome was very good. It's not good for mental health when you start stacking on stuff like that. The RCMP, they got to start dealing with all the extra added things that come with that as well. I mean, they're already taxed pretty hard on what their daily job is. It's not a job I want. I don't think most people would. They're heroes in a lot of sense for what they have to deal with on a daily basis. And then you start throwing all that at it that they have to do with the homeless and drugs, but then you can't put them in jail for it either. It's not good for anybody.
No, I think even I have several police officer friends, and I cannot imagine the frustration from their end to, have to chase people down, arrest them, do hours of paperwork, deal with the risk that comes with that, to have them processed and sent back out on the street 5 hours later to do the same thing over again. I don't know what it is like in the United States, Matt, but that is how it is here at the moment with the catch and release system that we have.
It depends by state, of course, but it's not much better. I'm pretty liberal on drugs. The issue is we have kind of we've turned loose the drugs we shouldn't have, and speaking of mental health, there's been all this research and experimentation into psychedelic therapies. Using basically, say, ecstasy for talk therapy with veterans with PTSD has proven very effective. Microdosing psilocybin is very good for depression. There's ketamine therapy and things like that. And those are the kinds of things that we are keeping away from people, but we're giving them marijuana. Like I said, I was very liberal. I wanted to decriminalize drugs, but as soon as we did that, there were taxpayer-funded injection sites popping up in major cities, and that's not what it's meant for. Like, the decriminalization of drugs is supposed to keep somebody from going to jail for 5 to 10 years for a little bit of weed in their pocket. It's not so the taxpayer can fund a heroin habit.
We have been through, between British Columbia and Alberta, which are the two neighboring provinces that border Washington State, Montana, and a little bit of Minnesota, that these two provinces have taken drastically different avenues. Although our previous government here, which was NDP, did move to a supervised consumption site. And they weren't supplying drugs, but they were telling people that they were allowing people in with small amounts of illicit substances to actually take their drugs so that they could be monitored while they did their drugs. And Rocky, that was, during your and my time when we were involved in municipal government. I'm sure you remember that very well. And, as soon as the Conservative government came in, the United Conservative Party of Alberta, that was almost completely abolished. What do you think of the entire subject?
Are you talking to me, Jeremy?
Yeah, Rocky. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, the safe injection site, it was just a nonsense all the way around, I believe. People were able to go in there, use their drugs. It was taxpayer funded, not only for the building and staff, but also for treatment for medical staff to be there. We threw a whole lot of money to watch people ruin their lives. There was nothing there to help them. There was no coaching to get off of it. They would test their drugs to make sure that they were safe, but we're accommodating the drug user. And our taxpayers are paying for that. Instead of treating for mental health and diverting money where things need to go, we're just throwing at a problem and continuing this problem to go on. And ending these injection sites did stop a lot of the crime in the areas around these sites. There's businesses that had to close. A lot of people's homes are affected. And putting an end to that, put an end to a lot of things.
One thing I want to add to that is, just for context for Matt, of course, is in British Columbia, which is far more liberal than where we are in Alberta. They neighbor us, and Tumbler Ridge was in British Columbia, or is in British Columbia. They went to supplying illicit substances to the people who were addicted. So they were actually manufacturing, and you're going to have to, if anybody wants to fact check me on this, I'm sure there'll be a few, because I don't know exactly what medications there were. I'm just going to spit out, medications, but they were manufacturing illicit substances in a laboratory in a pill format, and then actually giving a prescription to people who were addicted. And the system, when it initially launched, was great in its concept that it kept them from overdosing. The drugs were clean. They weren't going to die in people's basements with their meth pipe in their hand. And it could be monitored by a healthcare professional. And the problem is that they would walk into the pharmacy, they would get their 1 month supply of fentanyl or whatever it was, and they would walk out the door, and there was multiple pharmacists reporting that they were watching them sell their bottle of clean pills to a street dealer, who they were getting twice as much street drugs in return, and then those pills were being sold to college students. And so BC's solution to that was to issue 1 pill a day. So now each of those addicts have to go into the pharmacy to get their one pill a day. And that's, I believe, where the system currently stands. Of course, now you've got an entire demographic of drug addicted people who now have to figure out a way to get to the pharmacy every day, which is a massive problem.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I think that's ridiculousness. It sounds like a logistical nightmare. It sounds like there's way too much money being spent on that. Like I said, somebody doing drugs in the privacy of their own home, I'm not really concerned about. But when you start manufacturing, when you start feeding the addiction, that's a problem. And I have a problem with manufactured drugs anyways. Like if you want to grow your own pot, grow your own mushrooms, that's a little bit different than a substance, a chemical, that's created in a lab. But that's causing an issue. It would be one thing if you could see measurable metrics. And I know you're saying that they're clean drugs, and you probably did see a drop in overdoses, but then you see a whole new problem pop up of them doing this pill exchange for illegal street drugs. So any solution that creates more problems is not really a solution.
Jeff, are you a resident of BC or Alberta?
Alberta currently.
Alberta, but you have been a resident of BC
Most of my life.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think if you're doing what you're saying there or whatever, and then you're giving it to drug users and they're walking out the door. I mean, if there's some accuracy to this and college kids are buying it, I mean, when you make something legal like that and you do that, you're getting more people hooked on something that they shouldn't be. That black market, as easy it is to access, it's hard for some. And I feel that opens up a door for people that maybe would never go down that avenue. So yeah, maybe Matt's correct that the overdoses might have gone down, but maybe you're opening up a market that didn't even exist. People that maybe never try it. And what are the statistics on that?
Jeff has actually got a very good point to that. I mean, drugs, any drug is a gateway drug to more drugs. And when I was younger, I said I was going to drink alcohol. That was the only drug I would consume. Then you go to a party, you smoke a little weed. You're like, okay, that's all I'm going to do. Then you're at another party, something else is offered to you, and you just keep building on it. So yeah, Jeff is absolutely right. There's probably people that, use that resource that would have never tried drugs in the first place if it hadn't been there.
Rocky, what are your thoughts?
I completely agree with Matt and Jeff. That's an excellent point. Nobody seeks out to become an addict. It's a thing of opportunity. One day you get offered it, you try it, you become a weekend warrior one time, and then next thing you know, you're homeless on the street. Nobody set out to say, I want to be a homeless drug addict today. But then when you're producing this opportunity, and that's exactly what the BC government is doing, is giving the opportunity. Flooding the streets with these drugs. They just got to try it one time. Some people are hooked, some people don't. But if this stuff was harder to get, there's less people addicted.
I had a recent conversation with somebody here in Medicine Hat who was homeless and addicted to meth and was doing fentanyl. And she made a comment to me that will probably stick with me for the rest of my life. And she's actually a former nurse. And some locals may know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to give her name, but I sat down and I was talking with her and I bought her a cup of coffee and we just sparked a conversation. And she started to cry and she said, I said, how did you end up here? And she said, as a healthcare professional, I don't understand why they can invent all of these amazing drugs, but they can't cure this disease that I have called addiction. And, she says, I want to get better. I don't want to live like this. I don't want to do these drugs. Why can't they invent a cure for this? So I think that there's a lot of people that say drugs are a choice. I don't know how much of a choice it is if you don't have the ability and the cognitive ability to make a good choice. Is it still a choice, Matt?
Well, so Russell Brand once said, and I might be butchering the quote, but he said, there's no such thing as addiction. There's trauma. And this kind of circles back to that mental health thing. I don't know that I have ever met anybody, like to Rocky's point, who just set out to be a drug user. There's always something underlying there. And if you have the right community support groups, you have the mental health resources, a lot of this could be headed off. But, people have to medicate. They have to have something to get them through that trauma that they haven't resolved. Some people turn to religion, some people turn to drugs. I don't think there's, any coincidence that people who are on drugs usually get off the drugs and then go to religion. It seems to be, quite a pattern there. So, I hate it for her that she's addicted. But I think if she was truly to dig down and admit something in her past, we would find out that there is a reason beyond a physical addiction to the drugs.
Most definitely, I completely agree. So I'd like to do closing thoughts now. Matt, let's begin with you since you're already on. What are your closing thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So definitely want to offer from, south of the border, all of our, prayers with all the families that are involved with Tumbler Ridge. I know thoughts and prayers kind of gets a bad rap, but we sincerely mean it. I mean, there's nothing worldly that I can think of that would offer the peace that's needed in this time. So, we definitely mean that. And if there is a positive that can be gleaned from this, is that I don't think we need to continue the debate on banning firearms. I think we're now seeing that it's more about a breakdown in systems, that there are systems in place that are not working the way they should. If they had, this would not have happened.
Thank you, Matt. Rocky, closing thoughts.
I think throughout this discussion, it's quite apparent that it's not about the guns. It's not about who can get them, gun laws, gun banning. It breaks down to mental health, what our society has done and not done for our youth and everybody else. And there's definitely a serious need for repair. I really appreciate the input from Jeff and Matt and yourself, Jeremy. I've definitely learned a lot from you guys and seen a little bit of a different perspective than what I previously had before this.
Jeff, I guess we can end with the way we began with you. What are your thoughts?
Sure. I'd like to bring a little bit of a different perspective here. When tragedy happens like it has, and maybe you have a little hate or a little negativity or whatever, and then you watch what happened after that tragedy, you see the outpouring of support, whether it's through people like Matt with faith, or whether it's through other means, whether it's GoFundMe or donations or any of the above. You see what it truly means to be a human, what it truly means to be a Canadian. You see everybody support everybody. You know what it means to be a father, mother. You see exactly what it means to be true to yourself. And I think everybody felt it.
Thank you very much, guys, for coming on. I really appreciate it. I know this was an extremely difficult topic, and I would like to end letting Maya's parents know that we're all of our thoughts and hearts are with you. And whether that comes in prayers or everyday thoughts, I sincerely hope with every thread of my being that Maya pulls through, because we are all rooting for her. So thank you very much, and have a good evening, guys.